อ Я думал, он такой.
Нет, он ее бесплатно разговаривал, он писал, Так сложится, у нее сложится.
with the Vlora ship. I don't know if you maybe you remember this thing. It was like a ship coming from Albania, and there were like thousands and thousands of people on it, and they landed in Puglia, which is in the south of Italy, but it's like in front of Albania. Yeah. And we were agreed to have always been